Welcome back to another episode of Ancient Historia. Today we're going to be going into a beautiful book by a Spanish knight who travelled to the courts of Tamerlane in Samarkand. Not actually going to be following that guy's story, but we're going to be looking at the history of Tamerlane that is provided by this book. Because Tamerlane is known as the Great Tartar. He's the guy that supposedly had an empire that possibly covered most of Africa, Europe, all of Asia, including Russia and Siberia. It's a larger conquest than Alexander the Great. So when we talk about great leaders, surely Tamerlane should be counted among them. So this book itself is put together by somebody else using the diary of this Spanish bloke who went to Tamerlane's court. Now the information that we're seeking, the bits about Tamerlane, that's been provided to us by somebody else who's added that to this book. We shouldn't take it 100% because it is still part of the mainstream narrative of Tamerlane, and as this book will tell you, a lot of people in history that wanted to change Tamerlane to make him look like a very bad person for different reasons. They also wanted to make his empire not look as great. So we're going to delve into this anyway and see what we can find. So to start off, we'll talk about where this story actually comes from and what it is. Apparently in 1402 there was a Battle of Angora between Tamerlane and a sultan of Turkey called Bayezid I. Now this battle had some witnesses, two Spanish knights that were ambassadors, and they witnessed this battle, and Tamerlane sent them home to Spain with two women that he'd freed from Bayezid, a Hungarian and a Greek. And he sent those two women with these Spanish people and an envoy of his own back to Spain. The Spanish king at the time said, right, let's send an envoy back, and he chose a different knight called Roy Gonzalez to attend, and he returned with Tamerlane's envoy back to Samarkand. But like I say, we're not going to be focusing on that piece of the story today. We're going to be looking at the history of Tamerlane. We will start right here, the introductory life of Timur Beg. Before accompanying the good old Spanish knight from his native land through the regions of the Far East to the court of Timur, it will be well to refresh the memory with a brief sketch of the life of the mighty conqueror. At his birth, the enormous empire of his predecessor in universal conquest was rapidly falling to pieces, and the numerous kingdoms formed by the energetic sons and grandsons of Zengis Khan were for the most part in a state of helpless anarchy under the nominal sway of their degenerate descendants. Zengis Khan, his name is so written, who says that Zen means great and Gis means the superlative, so it's the greatest. This other guy asserts that Cheng means strong, so that Chengis is the plural. This guy spells the name Genghis Khan. So Zengis Khan actually sounds a lot cooler, doesn't it? And it means the greatest Khan. That's Zengis Khan. The most contemptible puppet descendants of the mighty Zengis sat on the thrones of Persia, Samarkand and China. The country between the rivers Oxus and Jaxartes, known to the Arabs as Mawar-ul-Nahir, had fallen to the share of Zagatai on the death of his father Zengis Khan in 1227, and the land had been ruled by his descendants for more than a century when Timour was born in 1337. But each succeeding sultan of Mawar-ul-Nahir had become more degenerate and more contemptible than his predecessor, while the insolent independence of powerful vassals at the head of large bodies of cavalry kept the country in a state bordering on anarchy. So, son of Genghis Khan, Zagatai, took control of this region between the Oxus and Jaxartes, sometimes known as Transoxiana. Ever since then, it's been under the control of these large bodies of cavalry. They've been controlling the country, but the country itself isn't being ran, and it's in a state of anarchy when Timur is born. Now at the bottom here, it does say that Grand Tartary, this is the number 1 from up here by Mawar-ul-Nahir, hope I'm saying that right. Grand Tartary extended from the Volga, which is in Russia, to the ocean, and from Gihon in Israel to Siberia. So that's quite a large area that's described there as Grand Tartary. Ptolemy divided this vast region into Scythia beyond, and this side the Amau, North of the sources of the Ganges, a range of mountains extends to Kashgar, where it turns to the northeast. This chain was called by Ptolemy the Imau. That part of Scythia on this side of the Imau, which lies between the Oxus and Jaxartes, was known to Roman geographers as Transoxiana, and to the Arabs as Mawar ul-Nahir. In 706, the Arab conquerors first crossed the Oxus under the command of Qatiba, who introduced Islam into the countries of Bukhara, Samarkand and Fergana. The thing is that Islam was introduced in 706 by Arab conquerors, which does match a map we saw the other day, of a Tartarian map which talked of the Kazakh Tartars having to fight against the Muslim Ismail, who was 900 years prior to the map. The map was made in the 1600s, so we assume that must have happened in the 700 AD. So this seems to fit, but obviously it does say Qatiba and not Ismail, but there must be some kind of connection there between Ismail and Qatiba and how they've brought Islam over to Tamerlane's country. That the most famous of Timur's ancestors was Karacha Nevian, the minister of Zagatai, and the first convert to Islam amongst the wild conquerors. He ruled with justice and moderation for many years and established his own tribe of Burlars around the town of Kesh near Samarkand. He became Sepa Sala, or general of Zagatai's forces, and the title was made hereditary in his family. But his great-grandson, Tartaria, who was Timur's father, appears to have resigned that office, preferring the retirement of Kesh and the society of learned men to the turbulent strife of the court of Samarkand. Tartaria, the chief of the tribe of Burlars, is said to have been a man of distinguished piety and liberality, and he inherited an incalculable number of sheep and goats, cattle and servants. His wife, Takina Khatum, was virtuous and beautiful, and on the 8th of April 1336 she gave birth to a son at their encampment near the verdant walls of the delicious town of Kesh. This child was the future aspirant for universal empire. So already they have kind of made a teeny bit of a mistake, because it is saying that Timur was born in 1337 on this page, yet over here it says he was born on the 8th of April 1336. So is that due to them rounding up in those days? Is that what you do, perhaps? I don't know. Or is that a mistake? You'd think it'd be easily noticed on the next page like this, wouldn't you? But anyway, it does tell us down here that Karacha Nevian, who is the most famous of Timur's ancestors, outlived Zagatai. So Zagatai is Genghis Khan's son who ruled the area, and we're going to jump over to a map now to have a look at where this was. Now this map here provides us a little view of the area, so we can see where we're talking about. And you can see Zagatai here is the area in question. Now Samarkand will be somewhere close by, right there. Yep, Samarkand, right above it. So although Samarkand does seem to move when you see some of these maps, it will be a little bit more south sometimes, although this is quite large. So this is showing down into India and China, Persia here. So this is where we are with the rule of Zagatai here. Now it also spoke of other descendants being on the throne of China here. We believe there would have been some kind of descendants on the thrones here, because we know in 1290 Prester John supposedly formed a Christian city called Tenduk in this area. So around this same period, Prester John, who is in some stories a mythological king of Ethiopia and stuff like that, whereas in this it will actually tell you that he's a Nestorian shepherd, but we'll get to that later. This is where we are at the moment, right in the kingdom of Zagatai at Samarkand, and now there is a town nearby, Kesh, and that is where Tamerlane has been born, and where his father leads these tribes of Burlars, or tribe of Burlars. The book says that Timur was of the race of Turkish wanderers, and that his countrymen lived in tents, loved the wandering lives of warlike shepherds better than the luxury and ease of cities, and even in the countries which they had conquered preferred an encampment in the open plains rather to a palace. When the man-child was born to the chief of the tribe of Burlas, he took it with its mother to pay their respects to the holy sheikh, who was reading the 67th chapter of the Quran and repeating this verse, "Are you sure that he who dwelleth in heaven will not cause the earth to swallow you up? And behold, it shall shake." The sheikh then stopped and said, "We have named your son Timour." It tells us that Timur's titles in the height of his power were Sultan Kamran Amir, Qutb Din Timur Kurkam Sahib Karan, which Sultan means Lord, Kamran successful, Amir commander, Qutb Din pole star of the faith, Timur it shall shake, Kurkan of the lineage of sovereign princes, and Sahib Karan, master of the grand conjunctions. So as you can see, this guy had quite the title. He was 7 years old. His father took him to school, where he was placed in charge of the Mullah Ali Beg. The Mullah, having written the Arabic alphabet on a plank, placed it before the child, who was much delighted and considered the study as an amusement. In his 9th year, he was taught the daily service of the mosque and always read the 91st chapter of the Quran called the Sun. At 12 years of age, I fancied and I perceived in myself all the signs of greatness and wisdom, and whoever came to visit me, I received with great honor and dignity. At 18, I became vain of my abilities and was very fond of riding and hunting. I passed much of my time in reading the Quran and playing at chess, and was also very fond of horsemanship. At this time, a change came over his habits. He repented of his past life, left off playing at chess, and made a vow never to injure any living creature. Now, as somebody that goes on to have an empire, I'm going to tell you, he doesn't fulfill that pledge. He does break that pledge quite a lot, but he feels bad about it. That's what's important. Proof here, it says, when the kind-hearted youth once unintentionally trod upon an ant, he was so deeply grieved that he felt as if his foot had lost all its power. Which, you know what, that's something I can agree with. I remember stepping on a snail once as a child, and now, ever since, I hate going out when it's raining because I think I'm going to step on a snail, so I'm always super cautious. So I can get that. Anyway, it says, such was this young man's character. In 1355, at the age of 20, his father Terege made over to him a number of tents, sheep, camels, and servants, and in short gave him a separate establishment. Wow, so he moved out. His dad gave him a house. Rich kids, eh? He began to look for some wider field of action and to form plans of rebellion against what he considered the tyranny of the Zagatai Sultan. So that's the guy that is currently in control of the Zagatai region, and by extension, this guy's country of Transoxiana. He could not find anyone to join him, but another turbulent spirit named Amir Kurgan, one of the greatest chiefs of the tribe of Zagatai, defeated and killed the tyrant and ruled the kingdom for 10 years in the name of another puppet named Danish Munch Khan. That's very interesting. Danish Munch Khan, eh? I wonder if he's a Danite, a Dane of the Dark North, as we saw on that map the other day. This guy, Amir Kurgan, I presume in 1355 or shortly around, he now takes the throne for supposedly 10 years. Although I don't think that quite works because he gets killed pretty soon. But it says that he defeated and killed the tyrant and ruled this kingdom for 10 years. Timur's father actually sent him to wait upon Amir Kurgan. So this guy is the new ruler of Zagatai, but again, it says that he's a puppet of Danish Munch Khan. Timur's father Tarege sends him to wait upon Amir, and the new ruler took a liking for the young chief and gave him his granddaughter in marriage. This lady proved a faithful and loving companion, following her lord in all his wild adventures and sharing his dangers and misfortunes. Danish Munch that he was not of the house of Zagatai, but was descended from Oktai, another son of Genghis Khan. In this year, 1356, Timur's mother died. He says, I was for some time very melancholy, and gave up my ambitious intentions. Oh, I can feel you, brother. And the name of his wife was Elias Turkan Aga. So she was daughter of Amir Mashlar, granddaughter of Amir Kurgan, and sister of Amir Hosen. So this guy, he's going to cause some trouble later. But this is now Timur's new brother-in-law, and he has married the granddaughter of Emir Kurgan, the guy that is in control. So I presume he's now the Sultan of Zagatai, or the Khan of Zagatai. But again, he is the puppet of Danish Munch Khan. Now, Timur started experiencing what it was like to be a chieftain. He was getting in some battles, he was going out on his hunting expeditions, all this kind of stuff. And it says on one occasion he lost his way out hunting in a heavy snowstorm. After wandering about for many hours, he reached the hut of some wandering shepherds, half dead with cold, fatigue and hunger, and was revived by the kindly talks with a largely supply of hot soup, of which he ate plentifully. Another day, he was sent against a band of invaders from Iraq, charged them at a gallop, and after a few cuts, put them to flight and took possession of their plunder. It was not, however, until 1358, when he was 23 years of age, that Timur's ambitious views began to take a wider range than the government of his native tribe of Burles. In that year, Emir Kurgan determined to invade Khorasan, and gave the command of 1,000 horse to young Timur, who was delighted with his new command. Okay, so Emir Kurgan now has decided to invade Khorasan, and we're going to have a look at that on the map so you can see where that is. Right, here we are on the map, so Zagatai and Samarkand, this is where our boy is. And down here, this area, all here, this is Khorasan, with Herat as the capital there, okay? So it's right near Kandahar. So you're looking at the borders between Iran and Afghanistan just there. And that is, that's Khorasan, which is now under attack, and Timur is taking 1,000 horsemen with him from Samarkand to help in the battle. The men became exceedingly attached to Timur. He wrote a list of their names and kept it folded in his pocket. And he was so elated by finding himself at the head of so many faithful followers that he resolved, when the ruler of Khorasan was deposed, to grasp the sovereignty for himself. The ruler of Khorasan was expelled and Timur was left in possession of Herat, while Emir Kurgan returned to the Oxus, where he was treacherously murdered by 2 Turkish chiefs. Now that's why I found the 10-year rule interesting before, because this is clearly in 1358. We thought that it was only in 1355 that Emir Kurgan took rule of the empire, so that's only 3 years rather than the suggested 10, so there's possibly some kind of mix-up with the dates here. I'd say definitely, because this history is all over the place. This sounds very concise, very neat, very lovely. Try and fit it in with world history, you'll have some trouble. Now, Timur was obviously pretty pissed off with this, and it says he collected his native tribe, induced several other leading men to join him, and he marched to Samarkand, where the victorious chiefs divided the whole empire amongst them. So he was pissed off, because he's just had his good friend killed, the grandfather of his wife has been murdered by, you know, treacherous chieftains, so he's taken his armies, he's collected some more people, and they've gone back to Samarkand and they've defeated these chiefs, and then they've split the empire up amongst themselves. Timur's ambition was now roused, eager to assume the sovereign power and to distance all competitors. His wisdom yet taught him the necessity of keeping on terms with the chiefs who were as powerful as himself, whilst he endeavoured to throw the ball of contention amongst them and to rise to the head of affairs amidst the general confusion. At this time, Emir Hosen, this is his brother-in-law, the brother of his wife, advanced from Kabul and was encouraged by his relation, encouraged by Timur, to invade Badakhshan, which he did in 1359. Now Timur says that this was the greatest error I ever committed during my whole reign, for the man was of a vile disposition, proud and miserly, but I did not then know his character. At this point he sent his brother to go and take over Badakhshan, but he didn't realise that his brother-in-law is a bit of a dick. While the petty chiefs were thus contending for superiority, the commander of a vast army named Tughlaq Timur Khan, of the lineage of Zengis, encamped on the banks of the Jaxartes and summoned them all to his presence. So I can't actually see it on this map, but the Jaxartes would or should be somewhere around here. So a king or a Khan from the east. Now we're not entirely sure which Khan this is at this point, because as we know there was a Khan down in China which could easily be referred to as the Khan of the East, or this could be a Khan from higher up in the Manchuria regions, or even possibly further up north, somewhere around here, the Tenduk areas that we've heard about. All we know is that one of these Khans, who is again another descendant of Genghis Khan, has now moved all his troops right up to here, and he's sitting on the embankments of a river, and he's summoned all the tribes to him. He said, come and have a chat, let's all talk. This guy is now on the banks of the Jaxartes and has summoned them all to his presence. His power was felt to be irresistible, and the chief selected young Timur to wait on him and to endeavour by his ingenuity to prevent the country from being overrun. Now it does say that at this time Timur's father Taragay died and was buried at Kesh. Timur was pretty upset, but he's been sent to replicate what he did, his waiting upon Amir Kurgan that got him into a high position. They have decided that he would be the best to send to talk to Tughluq Timur Khan, the names obviously having no connection between each other, but he has been sent to talk to Tughluq in an attempt to stop his country being overrun. Now when we say the country, I'm not sure whether it means the entire of Zagatai. I presume it does because it's got all the chiefs, or whether it refers to that smaller nation that they called it, the Transoxiana, the Mawul al-Nahir place. Now Timur was actually successful with this. He was very successful, and when he spoke to Tughluq, Tughluq decided to make Timur the sovereign, so the leader of this whole place, of his homeland, while Tughluq retired back into the deserts of the east. So Tughluq said, right, you know what, I like this guy, you can be in charge of your country, but you work for me now. He'd been successful, and now he was crowned as the leader by Tughluq. He had the support of these huge armies. So he was now not only the hereditary head of the tribe of Burles, but he had with extraordinary ease and rapidity obtained a prize beyond which his youthful dreams could scarcely have dared to soar. But the difficulties which surrounded his position, and the precarious tenure by which he held his power, were not disguised from himself, and he prudently deferred having the Khotbeh read, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, the Khotbeh, and coin struck in his name. So that means to have his name put on all the coins, you know, on all the gold coins and stuff. He decided not to do that until he had subdued all the nomad tribes. So he was quite aware that he could be killed or deposed at any moment, and he shouldn't waste time getting his face printed on the coins and stuff. He appears to have been, at this time, very decisive in his operations and quick to remove persons whom he could not trust out of his way. He says, I went to assist Amir Hosin in Badakhshan, and at this time Kai Kobad, son of Kai Khosrow Kutalani, who had killed the king of Badakhshan, waited on me and began to flatter me. But as I had no confidence in him, I put him to death. So Timur here, I'm not sure if this is, again, them trying to ruin his character by making him sound like a bad person, or whether this actually was his method, that he thought, nah, I can't trust this guy, kill him. Because this seems to be one of his own tribesmen, not his particular tribe, but one of his own you know, conglomerate's forces that have gone with Amir Hosen to attack Badakhshan, and he's actually killed the king of Badakhshan himself. So technically, you know, he's the rightful ruler now of Badakhshan by, you know, rules of combat. But Timur apparently feels he has no confidence in him and kills him. It says Timur was as yet too weak to establish order amongst his unruly countrymen. Haji Burles, his own uncle, was in rebellion and was only defeated after 2 days of hard fighting. Other chiefs tried to inveigle Timur into their power in order to assassinate him. Number 1 reference is about the Khotbeh. The Khotbeh is a prayer offered up in the mosques for the reigning sovereign. It means literally written from Kataba, so he wrote. Right. Okay, so that's a prayer that they say for the new monarch. So he insisted on not having that done. That's what that meant earlier. Not having the prayer read and not having coins minted in his name. Lots of villagers, people coming to him declaring that the land of Mawur ul-Nahir was desolate, and that in every district there was some tyrant who unjustly plundered the people. Finding it quite impossible to restore order single-handedly, Timur wrote to Tughluq Timur Khan, representing that the country was ruined, but offering with his assistance to make it productive. Now this might not have been a wise decision, because he's just called Tughluq back, the guy he'd convinced to retire to the east. He said, look mate, I need your armies, I need you to come wipe out these motherfuckers that are causing shit for my people. So the formidable chief advanced from the deserts of the east with a great army to the banks of the Jaxartes. The petty chiefs either fled or submitted. Haji Burles escaped into the Khorasan, where he was murdered by some villagers. Now before we continue, we will go back down. So that is Timur's uncle, remember? It says when Timur conquered Khorasan, he punished these people and gave their village in perpetual jagir to the grandson of his uncle, Haji Burles. So he actually took their village and gave it to the grandson of his uncle, because even though his uncle tried to take over, there does, and you'll see this a lot, even though people try and betray each other and all that, they're always giving each other more chances and saying, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. So Timur was pissed off that his uncle had been killed, and he punished these people. He killed a load of them, and he gave their village to the guy's grandson. So coming back to where we are with the Haji Burles escaping into Khorasan, and another chief had his head cut off for delaying to give up the gates of Samarkand. Now Timur at first received the command of all the hordes of Mawar ul-Nahir, and he then naturally began to think of a pretext for inducing his formidable ally to leave the country. So he's now got control of the whole thing, and everyone's listening to him, but he needs to get rid of Tughluq, who he invited in, doesn't want to leave. Unfortunately, sensed something was wrong. As it says here, his proceedings created suspicion, and he was ordered to be killed. He therefore fled with a few followers towards Kharizm and met his brother-in-law Amir Hossein on the road, who was also a fugitive. So now he's become a fugitive with some of his friends. Gone from here, and he's fled supposedly north to what is known nowadays as Khwarazm or Khwarezmia, which is just south of the Aral Sea. So obviously we don't have the Aral Sea on this. Unfortunately, we have some lakes, but we don't have the Aral Sea, which is where the Jaxartes and the Oxus kind of come from anyway. They came over here somewhere. So they've fled from Samarkand, and they're now on the run over here. And our King of the East, it did say he comes from the deserts of the East, didn't it? So he presumably would have been living around in these areas, which is Argon, if you remember that from our previous videos around here, Tenduk region over here somewhere possibly. But it's around the Gobi and around the Amur River, so you can easily locate the Amur River to know where we're talking about in modern day. And Kakajua, you will be able to find that as well. A shout out to my friends in the Discord server. He's probably watching this video right now. Big shout out to him for finding Kakajua. So now we're on the run, and Timur has his brother with him, and they share 60 followers. Now they make the mistake of deciding to attack the fort of Orgunj. So we have actually seen that. One sec. Right, and just as I promised, we have found it. So you see our Genj there? That is Fort Orgunj. So knew I'd seen it somewhere. But yeah, so that's where we are now. We've moved from Samarkand to over here, where they're planning with 60 followers to attack a fort here and take control of it. Now, on this map, you can see that Samarkand's location is over here rather than over here, but that can, that can be due to inaccuracies with the maps on the older maps, obviously. So unless it has actually moved, which we do see things like that, don't get me wrong, this could be a new location of Samarkand, perhaps it was over here before, I don't know. So we were here, so we have Samarkand right here where we were, and they've had to go on the run, and with his 60 followers and his brother-in-law, he is now attacking Fort Orgunj right there. So if we go to the bottom, it does say near the modern Khiva, which we'll easily be able to locate if we jump back to that map. And right there is Khiva. So Fort Orgunj just near Khiva. So this is where they're attacking now with 60 followers. Not that many, I know, right? Not quite the battle as you've come to expect, but that's what it is. Battle did not go well, and only 12 of them were left. Amir Hosen's horse was wounded, and his wife gave him hers, and was remounted on the same horse with Timur's wife, and they retreated to the top of a hill in the desert. And they continued to fight with the enemy, so there's only 12 of them at this point, but they're retreating to the top of this hill, and they're fighting until only 7 men were left. So 7 men, and presumably the 2 women that were with them, the wife of Timur and the wife of Amir, unless there were, you know, more women there. But with this devoted little band, Timur at length retired and fled across the boundless deserts. Now this was in the year 1362. This just gives us some information about Kharizm, or Khiva, which is the area which they were, and tells us a little bit of the location about where he was. They were wandering through these deserts, hungry and thirsty, and they found rest and refreshment with a shepherd who gave them part of a goat, and they enjoyed themselves exceedingly. So these 7 men and the 2 women, so a very small band of followers, are now off in the wilderness. His wife, Alice Turkan Aga, said, "Surely our fortunes are now arrived at the lowest point." Now it says that they wandered for days and nights. They even fell in with a group of wild Turkmens under one Ali Beg Gabani, who took the fugitives prisoner and confined Timur and his wife in a wretched cowhouse full of fleas and vermin for more than 2 months. This was the lowest ebb to which his fortune sank, and from this time the tide began to flow, which bore him on to the Empire of Asia. He escaped from his durance, collected 12 horsemen, whose numbers soon increased to 100, and raised the standard of royalty. So the standard, of course, being his flag, raising his royal flag to say, "I am king." Now, for the next 7 years, from 1362 to 1369, he was finally seated on the throne of Samarkand. Timur was engaged first in expelling the invaders from his native land, afterwards in a death struggle with his brother-in-law Amir Hosen. So first he had to deal with Togluk. Now, where was Togluk? Togluk Timur Khan had driven Timur into the desert, and he was ruler of Kashgar and of the boundless pastures further east, and he was at the head of a great army composed of a race called Geats, or Kalmucks, who were unconverted to the faith of Islam. Togluk, who was of the race of Zagatai, left the country of Mawar ul-Nahir under the rule of his son Elias Khwaja, returning to the pastures east of Kashgar. So he's going back to the deserts, presumably from whence he came, and he's left his son Elias Khwaja in control of the army. The first result of Timur's assumption of royalty was a quarrel with Amir Hosen, who took offence and left him. Many old followers, however, continued to flock to his standard, and after passing some months in hunting along the banks of the Oxus, he entered Seistan at the head of 1,000 horsemen in 1362. I will apologise for the quality of this book, some of the pages haven't been done properly. This will tell you that Seistan is a territory between Persia and Afghanistan, surrounded except on the north by wide deserts. It is a flat country with low hills here and there. 1/3 of its surface is moving sand, and the other 2/3 are composed of compact sand and clay, covered with the thickets of tamarisk and abundant pasture. So the Helmand, which is by far the finest river. So Helmand province, if you think of that. So that's the area we'll be looking at today, is around the Helmand province, destroyed, as you can imagine, through many years of war with both the Soviets and the Americans. So I wonder what kind of history had been lost there. It says he took several forts from the Balochis of Seistan, but was eventually defeated and wounded in the hand and foot, which obliged him to retire into the Gurmsir, or hot regions of the coast of the Arabian Sea, where he remained to recover from the effects of his wounds. And here it says, this gave rise to the story that Timur was wounded in the leg by a shepherd when stealing sheep, and to his name of Timur Lame, as in Timur the Lame, corrupted into Tamerlane. This name was first given to him by the Syrian Ahmed ben Arab Shah, who wrote a life of the conqueror in 1440. Arab Shah hated the memory of Timur for the devastation caused by his armies in his native land of Syria. He takes every opportunity of blackening his character. So of course This guy hates Tamerlane, and he gives any opportunity to corrupt his history. After he's recovered from his wounds, which we did hear about his wounds in other stories, but after recovering from his wounds at Gurmsir on the coast of the Arabian Sea, he collected 40 horsemen and he marched towards Balkh. And he was joined at Balkh by 100 men under his kinsman Sadi Burlas. So you know, from the Burlas tribe, joined by 100 men, and he has 40 horsemen of his own. It says they encamped under the shelter of a hill on the banks of a rivulet and lived by the chase, as in hunting, whilst their numbers gradually increased to 1,500 cavalry, and Timur found himself in a position to face the Jit armies under Elias Khwaja. Remember, Elias Khwaja is the son of Timur Tughluq, who are now in possession of his native land. So Elias, the son of Timur, is in control of his native land, and Timur has gathered 1,500 horsemen to battle against him. He says the spirits of the young chief rose in proportion. The companions of his early days flocked around him. His ambitious hopes seemed once more to be near their accomplishment, and his heart was filled with gladness. For encountering the enemy, he passed 10 days in feasting and rejoicing with his old companions in arms. So, you know, he's very happy. He's back. He's in charge, he's got all his boys, the boys are back in town, and they're about to go and claim their country back. 1363, he determined to fight a decisive battle with Elias Khwaja, but the odds were fearfully against him, as his force only numbered 6,000 men, while that of the Jits consisted of 30,000 victorious horsemen. Timur took up an entrenched position near the Oxus between Kulm and Kunduz, where he was attacked by the Jits. His troops showered arrows upon them, which forced them to retire, and on the following morning he took them by surprise in their own camp and put them to fight. Elias Khwaja, overwhelmed with shame at having been defeated by such an inferior force, retreated to within 12 miles of Timur's native city of Kesh. At this time, the news came that Tughluq Timur Khan was dead, and Elias Khwaja therefore marched away with all his forces, closely followed by Timur, whose armies rapidly increased in numbers. So as they're going, they're just picking up more dudes as well. Once the retreating Jits turned to face their foe, Timur charged at the head of his troops. So, you know, he's Tamerlane, but he didn't care. He was running at the front of his soldiers, and he drove them across the frontier. His native country was thus delivered from the invaders. Once more, the young chieftain was sovereign of the land. The citizens of Samarkand came out to meet him, and amidst the general rejoicing, his faithful wife, who had since the disaster in Sistan had taken refuge in the Gurmsir, came to share the prosperity of her lord. He has now defeated Elias Khwaja, who has retreated into the east, back into the kingdoms of his father, who's now dead, and he's got control of his lands again, and everyone thinks he's an absolute gangster. So it's going well for him. But it says the pretensions of Timur were disputed by his brother-in-law, Amir Hosin, and the feud continued for 5 years, although the rivals were obliged to unite their forces more than once to resist an invasion of their common enemies, the Jits. So it seems that the Jits were coming back. They weren't giving up, they keep coming back. Amir Hosin believes he should be in charge, whereas Timur thinks he should be in charge, but they had to join forces every now and then to fight against these Jits. Now it says in 1364 Timur crossed the Jaxartes and fought with the Jit army during the whole day. Night closed in with a heavy fall of rain, and the chief passed the hours of darkness in the open plain with a saddle for his pillow. The rain had converted the land into a swamp, but the Zagatais charged through it and engaged the Jits, who had received large reinforcements during the whole of the following day. Timur lost 2,000 men and was obliged to retreat to Kesh, where he refreshed his troops and eventually succeeded in clearing the land of the enemy. Amir Hosin, stirred up by jealousy, had now become Timur's implacable enemy, and Timur himself declared that as there was only one god in the universe, so should there be only one monarch in the land. So, he's done it. He's not only defeated the Jits and pushed them back into their own land, but he has crossed that river into their lands, and he has fought against them. He's lost 2,000 men in his battles, has retreated back to Kesh to refresh his troops, and then he's gone back out there and he's cleared all the land. So he's cleared everything now. The Jits have fucked off back to the east. It's all good. In 1366, he defeated his rival Amir Hossein and he forced him to retire across the Oxus. So he sent him to the west across the Oxus and said fuck off that way. Okay, but he's not killed him. But in 1637 Amir Hossein again attacked his brother-in-law and Timur retreated to Tashkent, where he passed a month in pleasant idleness, hunting and hawking over the plains and receiving 40 eggs and a turin of soup every morning from the Ketkoda, or ruler of the district. He defeated his rival in 1366, and we're going to go to the bottom, see what that says. In this year, Timur's faithful wife, the illustrious Alige Turkan Agar, departed this life. Verily we belong to God, and to him shall we return, was Timur's pious reflection. His wife has passed away in this same year. You know, it's probably a good thing because her brother is the one causing all this shit. She doesn't want to see what Timur's going to have to do. But Timur defeats his rival, and he retires him across the Oxus. But a year later, Amir comes back and he wants more fights, and this time Timur has to retreat to Tashkent, where Ketkoda, the ruler of the place, looks after him and gives him 40 eggs and some soup every morning. So he lives there for a month and he enjoys himself. It says his peace, however, was again disturbed by Amir Hossein, but his followers deserted him and he gave himself up to Timur, requesting permission to be allowed to retire to Mecca. His successful rival at first consented, but many of the rude chiefs had cause to hate the wretched captive, who had been cruel and insolent, as well as avaricious in the days of his prosperity. Timur appears to have been desirous to save his life, but he gradually yielded to the clamours of these officers, and Amir Hossein was killed by 3 chiefs who dragged him out of a minaret where he'd taken refuge. Hossein has now been killed by 3 chiefs. So he attacked again, but this time his followers were like, fuck this, we don't want to get involved. He gave himself up to Timur. Now Timur is trying to spare his life, but his 3 chiefs, or 3 of his chiefs, have said no. We need to kill this guy, he's a dickhead. So Timur is finally gone, and then kill him, and he's done. I guess if his wife had still been alive, perhaps she would have fought for her brother to still be alive, but unfortunately Timur was just like, fuck it, he is a twat, get rid of him. So now Timur had cleared his native land of seditious aspirants to the throne, as well as of foreign invaders. From the year 1369 until the day of his death, he held the sovereignty of Samarkand, while he extended his dominion over half the continent of Asia. He was formally enthroned in the city of Balkh by 4 of the most revered seers, or descendants of the Prophet, and all the people held up their hands in prayer for his prosperity. I hope I did a good job of cutting that. When this ceremony was over, he crossed the Oxus and marched to Samarkand, which he made the capital of his empire. From my 12th year, I travelled over countries, combated difficulties, and hazarded my person in the hour of danger, until I vanquished empires and established the glory of my name. Now that is what he said. So, he has come from Balkh. If we come back to our map, we can see that this here is the Jaxartes River. This one is the Oxus. So, this was where they were pushing the Geats back into their own lands. And this is where he'd pushed his brother over the Oxus this way south. Balkh is a town in the northern areas of Afghanistan, so I don't think it will be on this map, but it will be somewhere down here, possibly around here, not 100% sure, but it's definitely around here somewhere, and if not, a little bit south. So he came down here where he met some prophets. These prophets performed the ceremony on him, and then he's come back. So now he's come back to Samarkand and he said, this is my capital. If we come back to this river, I have just realised that the Oxus is right there. I actually completely missed that before. So thankfully the Oxus is there, which is strange because yeah, it's on some maps it comes from the Caspian, then others it comes from the Aral. One sec. Yeah, sorry, I just had to do a quick Google to make sure I wasn't chatting shit with that. No, I am right. The Oxus supposedly comes from the Aral, and so does the Jaxartes. But yeah, so this is definitely the Oxus, and I'm not sure if that then would supposedly be the Jaxartes. So this land in between the two is very possible, increasingly likely that that's what they've done. But you will see that Balkh is on here. So if you think Samarkand to Balkh, so this is the region, North Afghanistan. Now it tells us that Timur's first important act was to assemble a kurultai, or general meeting of all the principal chiefs and of the amirs or commanders of Taman. So the Taman or Tuman is 10,000 men, so the people that are in control of 10,000 men, and the Hazares, who are in control of 1,000 men, are 1,000 men. That's the way that he'd set up his empire. Now it says, although Timur was the real sovereign, he only took the title of Emir, and until the day of his death all the affairs of state were conducted in the name of a puppet descendant of Genghis Khan, who was sometimes permitted to reside at Samarkand, but who was more frequently to be found serving in Timur's army. Yet Timur established all the outward forms of etiquette in his court, and each rank had its established place where they appeared before him. So that is very interesting. That's saying that they actually got a puppet dude who is a real descendant of Genghis Khan. They've found a real descendant of Genghis Khan, and they call him the leader. Not only do they call him the leader, but he would be frequently found serving in the army. So does that mean that rumours of Timur fighting at the head of his army at such an old age were actually due to the fact that there was this puppet king at the head of the army that was presumably a lot younger and was actually fighting these battles for him after this? Obviously, prior to this, it seems Timur was fighting his own battles, but as he gets older, is it possible that this puppet king is the one that's actually going out and doing all these battles? Would that explain it? Now down here it will tell you that Timur frequently convoked one of these kurultais to address his nobles. This just gives us a bit of information on Timur's army, and it says, as the chief instrument of his power and his conquest, it received the greatest share of his attention, and a large portion of his institutes is devoted to the details of its organisation, divided into detachments of 10, 100, and 1,000 men, each under separate officers called respectively Unbashis, Uzbashis, and Mingbashis. I hope I've said that one probably butchering that as well, over whom there were many emirs, 4 beglebegs, and an emir umra who had authority over the whole army and acted as the deputy of his sovereign, so he acts on behalf of Tamerlane himself. Now it just goes into the stuff that they were given, which is probably not that interesting to you, but if you'd like to read that, you can pause it and have a look. And it says down here, the army of Genghis Khan was divided on the same principle into 10,000 men called a Taman, or a Taman Agassi, 1,000 called a Hazare under a Ming Agassi, 100 under an Uz Agassi, and 10 under an Un Agassi. So, and these divisions are said to have existed before the time of Genghis. So he's following on with that. Very simple stuff. Rules were laid down for guiding the tactics of the commanders when in the field, and in choosing a position, they were particularly enjoined to take care to be near water, on a situation more elevated than that of the enemy, that their flanks and rear were covered, and that the ground in their front was extensive and open. But the noblest, and considering his age and country, the most remarkable part of Timur's army's regulations was the treatment of the conquered. It is but too true that in the heat of battle the orders recorded in his institutes were frequently disregarded, but the fact of their existence proves that Timur's ideal standard of right was far in advance of other conquerors of his race and creed. He ordered that every soldier who had performed his duty and fought with valor on his side of the enemy, if he sought shelter under his authority, should be treated with honor and regard, since he had performed his duty and acted with fidelity to his former master. So this is how he's gathered such a large army when he's been defeating his foes, because he's recruiting these people to them, he's treating them with dignity, and he's saying, look, he was a good soldier, we should treat him right. The next page goes into some of the details of the throne, who sits around, and some of the establishments within the kingdom of the shepherds and how they would take their taxes. All this stuff is information that you can come and read for yourself, because it's probably not that important to the video, and I'm sure you don't want me to start going into the taxes of old Tartaria. But it does say that he used a lot of his money to repair things like the bridges and, you know, fix everything in the country, so he got everything running and he got it back up, because as you remember at the beginning, when he originally invited Togluk into the empire, he talked about how ruined the country was and how it wasn't productive. So now he's in charge, he's pouring the money in, and he's collecting taxes when necessary. So his country's back up and it's running properly, and he's established a government which is working. So for the first time in a while, he's managed to unite all these tribes and actually get a working government. Fighting seems to have stopped. The infighting has calmed down a lot, according to this. Tamerlane considered himself to have a duty to help people in other kingdoms. He says, "If in any kingdom tyranny and oppression and iniquity shall be predominant, it is the duty of a prince, from a regard to justice and the law, to expel and extirpate the authors of that iniquity and to assault that kingdom. It is the duty of a victorious king to bring under his authority every kingdom where the people are oppressed by their rulers, and thus I delivered Khorasan and purified the kingdoms of Fars and Iraq and Sham." The fact that this conqueror should have felt the necessity of framing some excuse to soothe his own conscience and to justify his conduct before posterity is a proof that this was not the mind of a mere barbarian, and his wars were at least as excusable as many that have been undertaken in more times and among the civilized people. Now I will notice the use of this word barbarian, how we assume that means ruffian, you know, uncivilized person. This is a bastardization of the word barbarian, which are literally barbarians, as we've discussed about in videos before, and this just shows the negative connotations they can attach to words to make you think of these things. So when you think of a barbarian, you think of an uncivilized ruffian, you know, a barbarian, a Viking, someone that's going to come in and smash up the place and steal all your stuff and try and kill your men and take your women. That's what you imagine with barbarian, and that's how they twist this language and how they can make something appear negatively just by language. So already, if you were to meet a barbarian, you'd think, ugh, look at this barbarian. But that's just the way they work. Now here it says, for several years the operations of Timour's army were confined to incursions into Kharazm and frequent invasions of the country of his ancient enemies, the Geats. But in 1376 he undertook a more important enterprise. Joji, is that it? Joji? Don't know how that's pronounced. The eldest son of Genghis Khan received the sovereignty of a vast territory from his terrible father called Decht Kapchak. What we're going to do is scroll down to the bottom and have a look what these say about this. It says, Goj means stranger in Mongol, and he was so called because his mother was in captivity when he was born. Few names have had a greater number of spellings. This guy calls him Guiji. His name spelled is Juiji, Zuzi, Juji, Tushi, and Chushi. So he's had a lot of names. Now, Desh Kapach is a Turkish word. Desh means a wide, uncultivated plain. So, Kapach is the area we're looking at here. You know, scroll back up to where it's coming. So where were we? Here, called Decht Kapach, which extended from the Caspian Sea over the greater part of southern Russia to the shores of the Dnieper. So Kapchak, if we go to our map, now Kapchak, all this area going to the Dnieper. So the Dnieper isn't on this map. The tip of it is this bit here. Now this river flows all the way up through the middle of modern day Ukraine, through Belarus, and then back into Russia a bit further up here. So it's pretty much a river that borders all of, you know, between Russia and Europe, essentially, is kind of what that is. But it is Europe. You are very into Europe at that point. So this area was called the Kupchuks, which was controlled by this bloke that we're talking about, this Joiji. So this is Joiji who controlled that area there. So everywhere from the Caspian Sea over the greater part of southern Russia to the shores of the Dnieper. So here's the Caspian Sea. This is the Dnieper, and obviously Moscow there. We've got the Kingdom of Bulgar with the Bulgars there, the Bulgarians. Astrakhan there, Kasan should be, yep, there. So these are Tartarian cities, and this area was called Kapchuk. That bloke died in 1226, 6 months before Zengis, and his son Batu Khan, carried the Mongol arms into Russia and Hungary and spread terror through all the Christian countries of Europe. Batu died in 1256, and his descendants of the Golden Horde continued to tyrannize over Muscovy until they were finally subdued and confined to the Crimea by the Tsar Ivan in 1552. In 1318, Uzbeg Khan was lord of Desht Kapchak, and he introduced the religion of Mohammed into his dominions. Now notice how they call that the religion of Mohammed and not Islamism, as they called it earlier on, making a clear distinction there between Mohammed, religion of Mohammed, and Islamism. So that's something interesting. On the death of Uzbeg Khan in 1342, his son and afterwards his grandson followed him, but in 1360 Urus Khan, descended from a younger son of Georgi, became sovereign of Kapchak. He reigned peaceably for several years, but at length Tokatmish, a member of his family, rose in rebellion, was defeated, and took refuge at the court of Timur, the new sovereign of Mawar-ul-Nahir. So, Urus Khan is in control of this Kapchak region we've just looked at, and a member of his family, Tokatmish, attempted to take over and got defeated, and he retreated down to the court of Timur. Now, this is quite different from what we've seen in other histories. I don't want to go too much into it because it'll waste time, but in our other book that we saw about, it was actually the Muscovites attacking Astrakhan and Kazan that was Timur's first battle. So the story it's the same, but it's all been twisted around. This is now later on in his life, and it seems like a different Khan was in control of Kapchak. So anyway, we'll read on. Timur saw in this feud a means of extending his power, and he received the fugitive with great honour. Urus Khan led an army against Timur, and the hostile forces met on the plains beyond the Jaxartes, but a terrible storm of snow and hail, accompanied by a hard frost, obliged Urus to retreat, and he died a few months afterwards. Timur then established Tokatmish as sovereign of Kapchak, and thus extended his influence and the fame of his arms through all the nomad tribes which wander over the interminable steppes of Central Asia. Yusuf Sufi, the ruler of Kharizm, alone defied the authority of Timur, and in 1378 the now powerful sovereign crossed the Oxus and laid siege to his enemies. We'll finish that in a sec, but we're just going to read these numbers. So Uzbek Khan, this number 1, is the 7th in succession from Georgi. He was much revered by his subjects, and from that time, according to Abulghazi Khan, who was partly supported by Kandamir, they called themselves Uzbegs, so Uzbekistan. Eventually the Uzbegs expelled the descendants of Timur from Mawar-ul-Nahir, and they still retained possession of Khiva, Bukhara and Kokand. Uzbeg Khan, and then obviously his son, and then his grandson followed him, and then Urus Khan followed after that. So as you can see, there's a lot of changes. They don't last long in power, but Urus Khan is then defeated in battle by Timur. Well, and he retreats because of weather conditions, so I don't know if he really lost, but he dies anyway, and Timur installs Tokatmish as the ruler of Kapchak, but Timur is the one in control. So anyway, we come back to this Yusuf of what's it called? Of Kharizm. Let's cut that bit. But anyway, yeah, so Yusuf of Kharizm challenged him to single combat, and Timur, in spite of the warnings and entreaties of his amirs, rode up to the edge of the ditch, but no one came out to fight him, and he returned amidst the applause of his own army. During the siege, Yusuf died, and the place having been taken by assault was utterly destroyed, the inhabitants being removed to Kesh, Timur's native town, which he had enlarged and beautified and made his summer residence when not engaged in war. So, with it being the capital, presumably that means Samarkand was utterly destroyed. So he moved all the inhabitants to Kesh, his native town, which was his summer residence when he was not in war. Now down at the bottom it says, more than a century before, Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Zengis, had founded a dynasty in Persia and put an end to the rule of the caliphs at Baghdad. After a life of conquest and devastation, Hulagu had fixed his capital at Maraga in Azerbaijan. Philosophers and poets assembled at his court, and his friend and advisor Nasir ud-Din was the most famous astronomer of the age. Hulagu retained the pure theism of his grandsire, and though tolerating both Christians and Mohammedans, he never embraced either of their religions. In 1264 he was succeeded by his son Abaka, a wise and prudent prince who strove to remedy the evils caused by the conquests of his father, and Argun, Ghazan and other princes of this dynasty were equally illustrious. But Abu Said, the last prince of the family who retained a vestige of power in Persia, died the year before the birth of Timour. From that time the fair provinces of Iran had been in a state of anarchy, and in 1380 Sultan Ahmed, a descendant of Hulagu, ruled at Baghdad. The family of Muzaffars enjoyed the sovereignty of Fars with the capital at Shiraz, and the other provinces of Persia groaned under the rapacious tyranny of numerous petty chieftains. Such was the state of things when Timur, the lord of Turan, determined to conquer the land of Iran. In 1380 he sent his eldest son Miran, then aged 14, with some experienced emirs to assume the government of Khorasan. An excellent bridge of boats was thrown across the Oxus, the army advanced to Herat, and in 1381 the Persian provinces of Khorasan and Mazandaran submitted to the conqueror. In the following years he added Sistan, Kandahar, Azerbaijan and Georgia to his rapid conquests, and in 1387 he encamped before the Persian city of Ispahan. The inhabitants submitted and Timur's forces entered the city, exacting a contribution from the people, but securing their lives and property. During the night of November 16th, a youth named Ali Kutchapa raised an unruly rabble and massacred many of the Zagatai soldiers. Timur was furious at this breach of faith and ordered a general massacre of the people, once again showing his respect of all life. And after having taken this terrible revenge, he marched to Shiraz, confirmed the Muzaffars in their government, and returned to Samarkand in triumph. So down here it says, during Timur's stay in the beautiful city of Shiraz, he had a complimentary interview with Persia's greatest poet, who died 2 years afterwards, right? So that's kind of irrelevant, but interesting. So Iran had now become a province of the Empire of Timur, and in 1389 he summoned a Kurultai, which is that we talked about, at Akir near Kesh to announce and celebrate his victories. So he's summoned all of the emirs from all over. So we're going to go over to our map, and we're going to have a look at the regions this guy's in control of now. So he controls all this bit here in the middle. He's got a guy in control of this who's submitting to him. He's taken over large portions here of this section, and he's made his way up to Ispahan and everything. He's taken over all these bits, and presumably he's in control of many sections here as well, because he's defeated the Jeets and he's moved to the east, so he's probably controlling these bits here. You can see down here is Shiraz, so this is where he marched down to Shiraz, where he installed the government over Persia there. So he's controlling this bit, and he's definitely got this bit, he's got that bit, and with that section he's probably got a good chunk of all this too. So these are all his regions now. This is his empire. So at his Kurultai, the emirs, the chiefs of Tamans and Hazares, were assembled at a solemn banquet, and two of the sons of the sovereign, Miran and Omar Sheikh, received the government of the provinces of Khorasan and Andasan. Timur now prepared for the greatest and most extraordinary military exploit of his life, the invasion of the illimitable wilds of Kapchak. During his absence in Persia, Tokatmish, regardless of the debt of gratitude he owed to his benefactor, made several incursions across the Jaxartes and was held in check with difficulty by Timur's young son, Omar Sheikh. In 1390, preparations were made on a great scale for the invasion of Kapchak and the punishment of its ungrateful Khan. The officers were ordered to collect a year's provisions for the troops under their command. Right, and that just talks about the stuff that was given to each troop, so if you want to stop there and read that you can do, but not too fussed. But we will go back to our map to have a look. So the dude that he put in, Tokatmish, the guy he'd put in control of Kapchak after defeating his family member, he has betrayed Tamerlane, and he's been sending some of his forces against our boys. So Tamerlane is getting an army ready, and he's gonna come and invade this whole area. Having completed all the necessary preparations for his hazardous and daring campaign, Timur left Samarkand in 1390. He crossed the Jaxartes by a temporary bridge at Khojend and wintered at Tashkend, where he was attacked with a severe illness. I thought it was going to be an actual attack there, but no, he was attacked by a virus or something. But he chilled for a bit, and in January 1391 the army marched out of Tashkent, and for 3 weeks the intrepid Timur led his troops over the arid and uninhabited wastes to the north of the Caspian Sea. At length he reached an isolated hill called Uluk Tok, whence he reviewed the vast plains of Kapchak, stretching away as far as the eye could reach in every direction. He caused a lofty cairn to be erected at this spot as a memorial to other times of his memorable expedition. Hunting as he marched, Timur then crossed the river Yelenjuk, and that gives its latitude, and his provisions at length began to fail him. His soldiers' rations were reduced to 1 bowl of broth a day, and the great hunting parties were organised, encircling a vast space and driving the game into the centre. Sheikh Daud, a chief who had been brought up from a child amidst these cheerless solitudes, was sent on in advance with a small troop of horses to reconnaissance the enemy who had hitherto remained invisible. He succeeded in discovering their camp, and in May 1391 Timur's army crossed the river Jak and found itself face to face with the vast hordes of the Khan of Kapchak. Right, so back over here, this is the river they're talking about. So I presume again that this must be their version of the Jaxartes, but I thought it should be a bit higher, and it should actually be connected to the Aral Sea, not the Caspian. But he stood on this mountain and he's looked out over all this area, and he said, "Nice." And he's become ill around here at some point, so he's had a little chill, and he's had a little chill and a sleep in this area. But then they've come back, and now they've crossed the river Jak, and they're going to have a fight with the Khan of Kapchak. So his armies are here, and now they're going to have a battle right here. Now, the Khan of Kapchak had a lot more soldiers than the invaders, but it says a brilliant series of cavalry engagements followed, which ended in the defeat and flight of Tokatmish, and the host of Kapchak was scattered far and wide over the plain. A small remnant escaped across the Volga. The conqueror was enchanted with the verdure of the plains between the rivers Volga and Jak, and was not a little astonished at finding that immediately the sun set, the dawn of day was clearly perceptible in the west. He passed the month of June in hunting along the banks of the Volga, and commenced his return march in July. So it says these plains were covered with his army. Great troops of cattle, sheep and camels were intermingled with the Zagatai cavalry and their prisoners, while the unwieldy portable pavilions of Timur and his emirs were dragged along by 22 oxen, 11 abreast. The ruts of these enormous wagons were 20 feet apart, and the axle trees were as large as a vessel's mast. The conqueror returned to Samarkand in the end of 1391. In the meanwhile, Timur's generals had crossed the river Irtish and penetrated into the wilds of Siberia. In the following May, he again departed with a large army to subdue the western parts of Persia, where the Muzaffars had revolted. This was known as the Expedition of 5 Years. The first year was passed in reducing the forest-covered provinces of Mazandaran along the southern shores of the Caspian, where an obscure town on the seacoast near Amul held out against his whole, I presume it says army. It does. For the first and only time in his life, Timur, the great commander of cavalry, was forced to have recourse to naval warfare. A brigade of boatmen with their boats and a band of slingers of wildfire were sent from the Oxus to the Caspian, where they embarked and invested the little town by land. Harrison then surrendered, and being followers of this accursed sect of Hassan Sabah, a general massacre followed. I like how they just call it a general massacre. Oh yeah, just a general massacre. Commenced the general massacre. Ah, that's interesting. Oh, that's cool. So these guys were assassins. Oh, so I've actually got an interesting book. Sorry to go off topic, but I have a book from the assassins. I don't know if it's directly from them, but it's a book about the assassins, which is really cool. We're going to go into that. It's a very old book about the Assassin's Order. And if you guys have played Assassin's Creed or know about that, that's what it's based on, so it's quite crazy. So the conquest of Tartaria having been completed, Timur wintered in the valley of the Gorgon. The Gorgons. The second year was occupied in the subjugation of western Persia. Passing through Fars and Hamadan, the invading army overran the province of Luristan, crossed the river Karun at Ahwaz, and entered Dizful. You have some more text to follow down here that says, whilst Timur was in the province of Khuzestan, of which Dizful was then the capital, he repaired the famous dike across the Karun at Shusta, which had been constructed many centuries before by the Tartarian King Nushirvan. It is made of hewn stone cemented by lime and fastened together by clamps of iron, and is 20 feet broad and 1,200 long. In the centre there are two small arches which allow part of the water to flow in the natural bed of the river. Meanwhile, Mansur Muzaffar, the ruler of Shiraz, prepared to resist the invader, and a decisive campaign ensued. In his march from Dizful, Timur followed in the footsteps of Alexander, making forced marches by Ramhormuz and Zora to the foot of almost impregnable heights of Kala Safid, which he assaulted and captured after a desperate resistance. Mansur, the ruler of Fars, then engaged the mighty conqueror, but his Persians were defeated, and he himself was killed in single combat by Shah Rokh, the son of Timur. So, Shah Rokh, son of Timur. Right, so we're going to go over to our map and have a little peek at where he went. It was around here, as you can see. He took his boys on their boats when he had trouble with one of these places around here. He took some of his boys in the boats and they sailed, and they had their fights along here, took their places, and they went down into Persia. Not all the cities are on here, so it can be difficult to spot, but either way, he moved down and he came down to fight the boys of Shiraz, the Persians of Shiraz, who he'd installed them, but they'd revolted against him. But he went in and he slapped them on the wrist and said, "None of that, Daddy's home." And they obeyed. They said, "Alright, sorry Daddy." So now Mansur has been killed by Shah Rokh, the son of Timur, the original Rokh, and the conqueror then entered the beautiful city of Shiraz and committed a little bit of genocide, just a little bit of genocide on the race of Muzaffars, and he completely subjugated the southern provinces of Persia. Timur did not remain long at Shiraz. The poet who he really... oh, that's sad. So he didn't stay long at Shiraz because the poet that he really liked had died. The wrath of the sovereign was only appeased by the slaughter of the rebellious people. So he didn't really want to remain there, you know. His favourite poet was dead. He just had to commit a genocide. It wasn't the best atmosphere, so he went home, you know. That's not the kind of party you want to stay at. There was nothing, therefore, to induce him to prolong his stay. I love how they say it more eloquently. September 1393, his triumphant army was led against Ahmed, the Sultan of Baghdad, who fled at his approach. Cruelty and misgovernment of Ahmed led the people of Baghdad to beseech Timur to succour them. These guys wanted Timur to save them, and he was more than happy to, but this guy fled, he ran away. So the Zagate cavalry overtook the Sultan on the plain of Karbala near the Euphrates, and a skirmish with bows and arrows followed. The Sultan's followers again fled, rallied, and were again beaten off by the cavalry of Timur. Probably not the best tactic, but a third time they rallied, and a desperate hand-to-hand conflict, oh I bet it was hand-to-hand, ensued. But Ahmed, being this time out of danger, his troops drew off. So Timur's cavalry suffered the agonies of a raging thirst, a return across the Mesopotamian desert to Baghdad. And it says after fixing the handball, which had been damaged, he marched into Georgia in 1394 and drove all who opposed him into the fastnesses of the mountains. He sent the different corps of his army in various directions to reduce the people to submission, whilst he relaxed the toils of conquest by hunting and festivity. So he came down here to Baghdad, defeats the Baghdad dude, takes over that, and then he marches north into Georgia. This guy just doesn't want to go home. Well, his wife did pass away. Maybe he just really hates being in the house alone, you know? So he just goes and does some genocide to clear his mind. But he moves up here and he takes over Georgia, and he forces all the people to flee into the mountains. And then it says he sends his generals in different directions just to subdue people. It raises the question how far his generals subdued, because we know from earlier that his generals had successfully moved into Siberia and started subduing those areas as well. So this guy at this point controls almost this entire map we're looking at. He controls all these bits, all these bits, all these bits. Now he still has to deal with uprisings. They seem to be happening all the time. It literally is like by the time he gets to here, here's uprising again. It's like capture the flag, you know? The minute you get over here and capture C, they bloody captured A again. So he's like, oh for fuck's sake, starts walking back down here like I'm gonna teach you a fucking lesson, and then these guys revolt, and he's like, oh, you bastards, and then he fucking walks up here, and then these guys revolt, and he's like, oh, you fuckers, and he has to go over here. That's literally what it is. The minute you settle, he calms down, he sits down, he goes, right, I'm gonna have dinner now, I'm fucking hungry. Turns around, these guys have revolted. At this point, he becomes a granddaddy. The births of his two grandsons, Ulugh Beg and Ibrahim Sultan, was celebrated with great splendour on the plains of Kars. The throne of Timur was raised in the midst of magnificent tents with lovely damsels ranged around it. Musicians and singers were grouped behind, and the Mirzas, Emirs, Nevians and foreign lords from Iran and Turan joined their voices in prayers for the prosperity of the mighty sovereign. The festivities lasted for 8 days. So notice he only had 8 days of festivities for the birth of his two grandsons, but there was 10 days of festivities before his battle with the Jeets. So that is quite nice, isn't it? You know, he's got his priorities in order. This short relaxation was interrupted by an eruption of the army of Tokhmatmysh through the gates of Derbent in the Caucasus. The Khan of Kapchak had recovered from the chastisement inflicted on him during Timur's memorable campaign and had once more renewed hostilities. Come back to our map here. Derbent is this city right here. So Tokhmatmysh, he had got some armies back together and he was pissed off, and he was just like I said. They decide to revolt and they bring their forces down and they attack Derbent. So Tamerlane now has to go back over here to solve that problem, because, well, I mean, he seemed to be already in the area, didn't he? Or he's just had the birth of his grandsons on the cars. So I can't see. There's the cars. So he's just had the birth of his grandsons over here, and he's bloody heard, oh, for fuck's sake, Tokhmatmysh is causing shit. Let's go sort him out. So they've marched up here to have a fight. He then led his forces over the pass near Mount Elborz and again encountered the army of Tokhmatmysh. The cavalry on both sides fought fiercely and charged each other with desperate speed, but victory again declared on the side of her favourite. Tokhmatmysh fled into the wilds of Siberia, and Timour, halting on the plains of Astrakhan, installed a son of Urus Khan as the new Khan of Kapchak. Before returning to his own dominions, the mighty lord of Turan entered Muscovy, penetrated to the shores of the Dnieper, and repassing the Caucasus, caused a great festival to be held on a plain in Georgia to celebrate his victorious campaign. The sovereign was seated on a throne in a splendid pavilion. The air was perfumed with rosewater, and bottles of Georgian wine were uncorked amidst songs and music. So, back to our map. After he's had this fight and he's defeated Tokhmatmysh, and he's installed one of the sons of Urus Khan now as the king of Kapchak, he has gone, fuck it, let's go sort the Muscovites out just to make sure they're not feeling cheeky. And he comes all the way in here to the shores of the Dnieper, like I said, halfway through Ukraine, following up Belarus and coming back in. So it's around here. You can't really see it, but it is from there. So he comes all the way up here, and he just beats the Muscovites up a bit, hands out a few slaps, reminding people who's in charge. And then he comes back down, and he has a big party and gets drunk in Georgia. Laughs about it. There's the man who had not many years before been a destitute wanderer in the deserts of Kharizm, had now arrived at the highest pitch of earthly glory. The chiefs on the western and northern shores of the Caspian submitted to his sway. His eldest surviving son, Miran, was governor of Azerbaijan. The wealthy city of Ormuz in the Persian Gulf paid him tribute. And down below it says Ormuz, which was for ages the great emporium of trade in the Persian Gulf, was originally founded by a colony of Arabs, and the city appears to have enjoyed centuries of peace and commercial prosperity. In 1290, the Mongols invaded Ormuz, and the inhabitants fled to a barren volcanic island at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, which was named Ormuz in memory of the ancient city. The king of his new Ormuz considered it prudent to send tribute to Timur. This is a beautiful example of exactly what I've said about places moving. You see, when they moved from Ormuz, they go to a new place and they called it Ormuz because that's where they're from. So sometimes when you see cities moving around the world, it's because the people from that city literally moved. Just like Troy, why there was a Troy in Britain, because the Trojans from Troy got here and said, let's call this Troy. Now it says that all the people of Central Asia acknowledged him as their sovereign, returned to Samarkand in 1396 and occupied himself for some time in the arrangement of the internal affairs of his vast empire, and in erecting splendid edifices in the land of his birth. Superb mosques and palaces were built at Samarkand and Kesh, gardens were laid out full of fragrant flowers, marble was transported from Azerbaijan, and porcelain to adorn the chambers from the distant empire of China. So he's rebuilt Samarkand now, he wants it nice and sexy, and he also improves Kesh, which was his summer home nearby. So for a time, the enjoyment of great power and the opportunity to work with much good in establishing peace throughout his new enormous empire had charms for Timur, but after an interval of rest, the conqueror still found the lust of conquest strong upon him, and from the heights of Mawar-ul-Nahir he looked down with longing eyes on the fertile plains of India. This guy just can't get enough. Having conceived the idea of conquering the rich empire of Hindustan, he asked counsel of his sons and nobles, but they all opposed it, except Shah Rukh. My design for reducing Hindustan. First I asked counsel of my sons and my emirs, and Shah Rukh advised it. But the emirs opposed, and I forgave them. Resolution, however, had already been taken, and his grandson Pir Muhammad crossed the Indus and laid siege to Multan. Meanwhile, Timur led his army across the Oxus, commenced a new campaign in 1398 by attacking the infidel mountaineers who inhabit the ravines of the Hindu Kush. That tremendous range of mountains which was called by the Arabs the stony girdle of the earth. It was in the month of March that Timur with 62,000 men entered the defiles of that mighty range which rises in a bold and precipitous line with sides bare, black and polished from the plains of Balkh and Kunduz. At that time of year and until the end of June the passes are clear of snow, but they are destitute of vegetation, and mural precipices rise up perpendicularly on each side of the road to a height of 2,000 or 3,000 feet. The summits of the peaks are covered with eternal snow. The approach of the invaders, the mountaineers retired into the deep ravines where they were protected by snowdrifts. No difficulties, however, could daunt the intrepid conqueror or turn him from his purpose. Ordered his army to be lowered down the rocky walls by ropes from ledge to ledge. The sovereign himself was lowered down on a stage of planks secured together by iron rings, and the operation was 5 times repeated. The whole party was now on foot, except Timur himself, whose horse had also been lowered down, and this put them on equal terms with the mountaineers, who were, however, so amazed at the unexpected appearance of the invaders that they abandoned their stronghold, sued for mercy, and humbly submitted to the authority of the mighty Lord of the Conjunctions. Timur then continued his march to Kabul and prepared for the invasion of India. So this guy's a full-on nutcase. This guy is like Tom Cruise on the set of every movie ever. He was like, fuck it, lower me down. So they abandon all their horses at the top of this mountain. They get their ropes out and they start climbing down the side of the mountain like the fucking SAS. That's impressive. The mountaineers stare at them in disbelief. Like, are they really? Yep. They're lowering a king on a horse down a mountain on a plank of wood. He carries on down to India. Hindustan had been ruled by Muslim conquerors since the days of Mahmud of Ghazni, and at this time, Mahmud of the house of Tughlaq reigned at Delhi over a disorganized empire consisting of a Muslim army, a Hindu population, and various Rajput states which were virtually independent. Timur crossed the Indus in 1398 and united his army with that of Pir Muhammad on the banks of the Sutlej. He then marched to Delhi, slaughtered a vast number of prisoners who hindered his progress, and encamped on the banks of the Jumna in January 1399, where he found the Indian army under King Mahmud, drawn up in order of battle, with 10,000 horse, 40,000 foot, and a brigade of elephants. Timur, to use his own words, resolved to appear weak in the sight of the Sultan of Delhi, and he surrounded his army with a ditch. This stratagem filled the Indians with presumptuous confidence. They marched into the plain, were charged furiously by the Zagatai cavalry, and utterly defeated. Delhi fell into the hands of the conquerors, and an accidental collision with the citizens led to a general massacre. The holy city of Mutra met with the same fate, and Timur, satisfied with having become a Ghazi, or slayer of infidels, determined to return to Samarkand. He marched by the sources of the Ganges, Kashmir and the Punjab, and crossing the Indus by a bridge of boats, he made a triumphal progress through the defiles of the Hindu Kush to his capital, which he reached in April 1399. Spoils above measure were brought from India by the conqueror, who commenced the erection of a grand mosque at Samarkand. 90 captured elephants conveyed the stones from the quarries, and this splendid edifice, the monument of Timur's conquest, consisted of a vaulted roof supported on 480 pillars of hewn stone with doors of brass, walls decorated with inscriptions in relief, and lofty minarets at the four corners. It is now a mere heap of ruins. After a brief season of repose, the conqueror was again obliged to take to the field, owing to the deplorable misgovernment of his eldest son, Miran Mirza, in Azerbaijan. Having tranquilized that province, he prepared to invade the territory of the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid. As the towns of Baghdad, Aleppo and Damascus were taken, and the Turk was utterly routed at Angora on the 30th of July 1402. These transactions are faithfully recorded by the Spanish ambassador who followed the conqueror on his return march to Samarkand. The events which followed the magnificent festivities and grand rejoicing at which Clavijo was present, and which are fully described by the Eastern historian Ali of Yazid, it concluded the career of this extraordinary man. Clavijo gives an account of the insolent message of the Chinese envoys which excited the wrath of the aged warrior who resolved upon invading the Celestial Empire in the depth of winter. He marched out of Samarkand on the 8th of January 1405 in a heavy fall of snow, and crossing the Jaxartes upon the ice, he encamped at a place called Otra, where he became ill, and he died on the 17th of that month in the year 1405, aged 69, leaving 36 male descendants. So that is the story of Tamerlane according to this history book. Now, it's quite different from the other story we read. This one leaves out General Aksala, who was apparently a big piece of Tamerlane's history. The general was a Christian Greek general related to the emperor, the Greek emperor of Constantinople, Palaeologus, apparently. So he's been completely removed. The attacks by Bayezid at Constantinople, and apparently the request for aid from Constantinople, which was the motivation for this attack on Bayezid in the first place, has been completely left out. So it's up to you with what you decide the truth is there, but I found this a very interesting, very in-depth look at some of Tamerlane's history. It gives us quite a few names of the different Khans and different rulers of the areas. It helps us to really see Tamerlane's empire for what it was. Now again, there is stuff that's left out. After 1402, after his defeat of Bayezid at Angora, according to the other book, he actually then joined forces with the Greeks, who gave him 10,000 horsemen, and they went and subdued Egypt and the greater part of Africa. Some of the things as well in those stories are back to front. So in the first book, it was said he had his first war with the Muscovites at Astrakhan and Kazan, defeated them. Then he invaded China and took over the Chinese Empire. Then he had his war with Constantinople, and then after that he invaded India, Persia, Africa, including Egypt and stuff. And as well, in that other book, it said that the Greek emperor actually gave him kind of command of the Greek Empire. Tamerlane did say no to controlling it, but he did still receive tributes from the Greeks, which meant that they were essentially part of his empire too for a brief period until they switched emperors. And it leaves that out. In fact, it leaves out the apparent switch of emperors, of the Greek emperors of Palaeologus, which caused a joining of forces with the Turks that Tamerlane had to subdue as well. So there's a lot of differences in the histories between this book and the last one we read, but either way, I think it gives us a broader view of Tamerlane's career and allows us to better understand some of the things he did and went through. Now, of course, this could all be bollocks. It could just be written by someone else and not true at all. But this is more information than you'll find about Tamerlane online and on Wikipedia and stuff. So in that sense, it's a very good basis for building a career for this Great Tartar. He was known as Tamerlane the Great Tartar. So anyway, if you made it to the end of this video, it's been ridiculously long, but I didn't want to split it into two parts, then well done, pat yourself on the back, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of reading, a lot of me just talking, but I hope it was more entertaining than reading it yourself. I hope the map helped to see where some of these things were, where it was all taking place, some of the cities involved, things like that. If you'd like to support the channel, you know how to. There's links. You know, you buy me coffee, join the Patreon, you can join the channel, all that stuff. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next episode.